Throughout history, humanity has found countless ways to mark the passage of time, to celebrate community, and to express joy in the strangest forms imaginable. Some festivals were tied to the cycles of nature, some to religion, and others seemed to exist purely for the sheer delight of the bizarre. While today we may think of festivals as music events, food fairs, or seasonal markets, the festivals of the past were often a blend of ritual, spectacle, and sometimes downright peculiar customs that to modern eyes appear almost unbelievable. Yet each one carried meaning to those who celebrated, giving us a glimpse into worlds where joy, fear, humor, and ritual combined in unexpected ways. This script will take you on a calming but fascinating journey through these unusual celebrations, wandering from medieval Europe to distant corners of Asia, from desert rituals to oceanfront traditions. We will explore the reasons behind these eccentric festivities, the atmosphere they created, and what they reveal about the people who celebrated them. Prepare to be surprised, amused, and gently drawn into stories where human creativity expressed itself in ways that might appear outlandish, but were deeply cherished. Section 1. The Festival of the Ass. One of the strangest and perhaps most delightfully whimsical festivals of medieval Europe was the Festival of the Ass, celebrated primarily in France during the Middle Ages. At first mention, it sounds like a jest, something made up to entertain children. But this festival was quite real and filled with a blend of humor, reverence, and irreverence that was typical of medieval popular culture. The festival honored the donkey, an animal with a surprisingly important role in both biblical stories and everyday life. Donkeys were beasts of burden, carrying goods, plowing fields, and enduring tasks that larger horses might have resisted. Yet in the biblical tradition, the donkey also had a noble place. It carried the Virgin Mary to Bethlehem, bore Jesus during his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and appeared in countless parables and legends. Thus, while humble, the donkey symbolized patience, endurance, and service. The medieval church, with its blend of sacred solemnity and earthy humor, elevated this simple creature into the focus of its own annual celebration. During the Festival of the Ass, which often coincided with Christmas or Epiphany, churches staged elaborate parades and plays where donkeys were decorated with bright cloths, garlands, and bells. In some towns, a real donkey was led right into the church and given a place of honor near the altar. In certain regions, the donkey was even brought up onto the steps of the pulpit as though it were delivering a sermon of its own. The congregation, rather than responding with the usual chants of Amen, would sometimes respond with loud brays of hee-haw, filling the holy space with laughter and echoes of animal sounds. The hymns sung during this festival were equally unusual. Some were playful parodies of church chants, rewritten to celebrate the donkey's virtues and humble character. In one recorded example, a song praised the donkey as noble, strong, and sturdy, encouraging the faithful to join in braying at the end of each verse. Imagine the sound of a medieval cathedral ringing, not with solemn Latin hymns, but with hundreds of voices deliberately imitating the cry of a donkey. For those who lived in towns burdened by hardship, famine, or plague, this day of lightheartedness must have been a rare chance to laugh in community, even within the walls of the church. What makes the Festival of the Ass particularly fascinating is the way it reflected the medieval tendency to blur the lines between sacred and comic, between ritual and carnival. It was not considered blasphemous to celebrate the donkey this way. In fact, it was a reminder of the divine lessons that could be found in the lowliest of creatures. The humor itself was an offering, a way to acknowledge that joy, even when expressed through absurdity, was part of the human experience and thus could have a place in worship. Yet as centuries passed, the more irreverent elements of the festival began to make church leaders uneasy. The mock sermons, the braying, and the parody hymns were seen by some as too disruptive to the solemnity of religious life. By the late Middle Ages, many of these donkey festivals had been suppressed or transformed into more restrained forms of pageantry. Still, echoes of the festival lived on in folk celebrations and local carnivals, where animals were often featured in humorous roles. Today, when we hear about the Festival of the Ass, it can sound absurd. Why would anyone bring a donkey into a church and encourage the congregation to bray? But looked at closely, it reveals something tender about medieval communities. In celebrating the donkey, they celebrated humility, service, and endurance, virtues that they saw reflected in their own lives of toil and faith. At the same time, the joyous absurdity gave people a chance to laugh together, to momentarily escape the weight of their hardships, and to find holiness in humor. It is a reminder that festivals, no matter how peculiar, are rarely pointless. They speak to the needs of the people who create them, whether that need is for laughter, for unity, or for a way to find beauty in the simplest things. The Festival of the Ass stands out not only as one of history's strangest celebrations, but also as one of the most charming, showing us that even in the echoing halls of a cathedral, there was room for joy that sounded like a donkey's bray.
Section 2, Japan's Hadaka Matsuri, the Festival of Nakedness. Among the many unusual festivals that history has preserved, few strike the modern imagination quite like Japan's Hadaka Matsuri, often called the Naked Festival. At first hearing, the name alone might spark laughter or disbelief. Thousands of men, nearly unclothed, packed together in the cold winter air, wrestling, shouting, and pushing in a chaotic display of energy. But beneath the apparent absurdity lies a celebration deeply rooted in tradition, symbolism, and the human desire to purify the self while connecting to the spiritual world. The Hadaka Matsuri can be traced back more than 500 years, and it is still celebrated today, particularly in Okayama Prefecture. The central idea of the festival is purification, an important concept in Shinto belief. By stripping down to almost nothing, typically just a thin loincloth called a fundoshi, and sometimes a pair of white socks known as tabi, participants symbolize shedding impurities, worldly possessions, and even the distractions of everyday life. What remains is the raw human form, vulnerable, equal, and ready to endure hardship for the sake of renewal. The atmosphere of the festival is electric. Imagine the sight. Thousands of men packed tightly into temple grounds, bare skin glistening in the winter air, steam rising from their bodies as they shout in unison. Lanterns glow overhead, casting a golden light across the crowd. The sound is a mix of chanting, laughter, and the pounding of drums. Despite the cold, energy radiates through the participants as they prepare for the climax of the night. That climax comes when sacred objects, known as shingi, are thrown into the crowd by a priest. These small wooden sticks are believed to bring immense luck and blessings to whoever manages to capture them. Yet catching the shingi is no easy task. As soon as they land among the participants, chaos erupts. Thousands of hands reaching, shoving, grappling, and even tackling in desperate attempts to seize them. The men who hold on to the sacred sticks must then fight their way to the end of the hall and place them into a special box. securing their fortune for the year to come. The struggle is fierce, and while it may appear violent, it is not meant to be malicious. Instead, it is a physical expression of the obstacles one must overcome in life to achieve blessings or enlightenment. Bruises, cuts, and exhaustion are common, but they are worn almost as badges of honor, proof of having participated in a sacred rite that demands strength, courage, and determination. What makes this festival particularly fascinating is the mixture of sacred solemnity and wild, almost chaotic energy. On one hand, the Hadaka Matsuri is an intensely spiritual event, meant to cleanse participants and allow them to receive divine favor. On the other, to the outside observer, it can look like a massive, chaotic brawl of nearly naked men wrestling in the cold. This duality, sacred and wild, solemn and absurd, captures something essential about human festivals across cultures: the ability to hold both reverence and revelry in the same space. The nakedness itself also carries layers of meaning. In the Shinto worldview, purity is associated with naturalness, and few things are as natural as the human body. By discarding elaborate clothing, participants remove the symbols of status, wealth, or profession that divide them in daily life. In that crowd of thousands, all are equal. A farmer might stand shoulder to shoulder with a wealthy merchant. A craftsman might wrestle with a scholar, and for that night, none of it matters. They are all the same, bare, determined, and united in the pursuit of luck and purification. It is also striking to consider the festival's timing. Hadaka Matsuri takes place in the dead of winter, when temperatures can be brutally cold. The hardship of enduring such conditions nearly unclothed is part of the ritual's meaning. It is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to challenge both body and spirit. Those who participate demonstrate their willingness to suffer for renewal, and their ability to face discomfort becomes a metaphor for resilience in the year ahead. For the communities that host the Hadaka Matsuri, the festival is not only a spectacle, but also a unifying force. Families prepare food, streets fill with decorations, and spectators gather to cheer. Tourists and locals alike marvel at the energy of the event. But for those participating, it is deeply personal. To walk into that crowd, to strip away both clothing and pride, is to step into a ritual space that connects them not only with the divine, but with countless generations who have done the same before them. The Hadaka Matsuri reminds us that unusual festivals are rarely only about the surface spectacle. What might seem absurd, thousands of nearly naked men wrestling in the cold, is in fact an ancient, meaningful tradition tied to ideas of purification, equality, and endurance. It is bizarre, yes, but it is also profoundly human. Looking at it today, the Hadaka Matsuri stands as a vivid example of how festivals blur the lines between the sacred and the ridiculous, the spiritual and the physical. It is a festival that makes us pause and reflect. Perhaps the act of stripping away the trappings of daily life and facing the cold together is not so far from the universal desire to start fresh, cleansed of what burdens us. And so, while it may be one of the strangest celebrations in the world, it is also one of the most enduring, proving that the bizarre often carries deeper meaning than first meets the eye. Section 3. The Feast of Fools When the World Turned Upside Down. In the grand tapestry of unusual festivals, few can rival the sheer strangeness, joy, and controversy of the Feast of Fools, celebrated across parts of medieval Europe between the 12th and 16th centuries. If most festivals existed to enforce order, celebrate religious devotion,
or honor kings and saints. The Feast of Fools did the exact opposite. It turned order on its head, mocking authority, inverting roles, and encouraging a level of silliness and irreverence that seems almost unimaginable within the solemn context of medieval society. At its heart, the Feast of Fools was a festival of reversal. For one day each year, often coinciding with New Year or Epiphany, the rigid hierarchies of medieval life crumbled. Priests became clowns, peasants played the part of bishops, and laughter replaced the solemn chants of church services. Imagine the most sacred building in a medieval town, the towering cathedral, its vaulted ceilings echoing with chants, and then picture the same space, filled with people, dancing, singing off-key, braying like donkeys, or parading in masks. That was the Feast of Fools, a brief, bizarre moment when the rules of the world no longer applied. The festival often began within the church itself, where junior clergy, choir boys, or sometimes even lay people would take over and elect a mock leader, often called the Lord of Misrule or the Bishop of Fools. This figure, usually a lower-ranking member of society, was dressed in elaborate robes, crowned with a mitre, and treated with the mock respect usually reserved for actual bishops. With this reversal in place, the entire town entered a topsy-turvy world where power flowed not from hierarchy, but from parity. From there, the absurdity escalated. In some places, mock sermons were delivered, nonsense words strung together to poke fun at the formality of religious rituals. In others, people dressed in outlandish costumes, sometimes donning animal masks, and paraded through the streets singing bawdy songs. Church altars might be filled with sausages, dice, or even pig's feet, as symbols of gluttony and laughter replaced sacred imagery. One chronicler even described priests dancing in the sanctuary, throwing dice, and eating fat sausages right beside the altar, a scene that shocked church authorities but delighted the common folk. Why would such a bizarre and irreverent festival be tolerated, even encouraged, in such a pious age? The answer lies in the human need for release. Medieval life was harsh and heavily structured. Ordinary people lived under strict hierarchies. Nobles above peasants, priests above lay people, men above women. The Feast of Fools provided a rare and cathartic inversion of this order. For just one day, the weight of seriousness lifted, and laughter was not only permitted, but celebrated. It was a social safety valve, a way of releasing tensions that might otherwise build into discontent. For the clergy, too, the festival may have served an important purpose. By allowing a day of chaos, the Church reinforced the value of order on the other 364 days of the year. To experience life turned upside down was to remember why the usual structure mattered. Yet, as one might expect, the balance was not always easy to maintain. The Feast of Fools was highly controversial. While many ordinary people adored it, higher church officials often condemned the festival as blasphemous. Decrees were issued again and again, attempting to ban or curb the excesses of the celebrations. The Council of Basel, in 1431, for instance, officially denounced the Feast of Fools, citing its indecent and unbecoming behavior. Yet despite such efforts, the festival lingered for centuries, too beloved by the people to vanish overnight. To modern eyes, the Feast of Fools looks almost like a medieval carnival, wild, colorful, and absurd, but it carried deeper symbolic meaning. By mocking the sacred, people acknowledged its power. By inverting hierarchy, they highlighted its rigidity. By celebrating foolishness, they gave wisdom its value. The laughter of the Feast of Fools was not empty. It was a kind of ritualized chaos that reaffirmed the importance of order by breaking it temporarily. One of the most fascinating aspects of the festival is how it allowed lower voices to be heard. A choir boy, for instance, who spent the year obeying orders, might suddenly find himself as the Bishop of Fools, paraded through town with cheering crowds. For peasants and workers, the day offered the chance to laugh at the nobility or clergy without fear of punishment. In this way, the Feast of Fools became more than just comic relief. It was a subtle, temporary leveling of society. Yet the festival's legacy did not vanish when it was finally suppressed in the 16th century. Its spirit lived on in later European carnivals, in Mardi Gras, and even in the playful traditions of modern holidays. Whenever we see role reversal, children ruling classrooms for a day, jesters mocking kings in stories, or costumed parades that blur the line between sacred and silly, we see echoes of the Feast of Fools. Looking back, the Feast of Fools shows us that even in the strictest and most pious times, people found ways to celebrate the bizarre. They carved out space for laughter, parody, and irreverence, reminding us that joy is as essential to human life as devotion. It may seem strange that some of the most serious cathedrals in Europe once rang with donkey brays, dose rolling, and sausage feasts, but that is precisely what makes the story so compelling. It reveals the paradox of the human spirit, the ability to hold both reverence and ridiculousness, seriousness and silliness, often in the very same space.
Section 4. The Festival of Drunkenness, Egypt's Night of Ecstatic Joy. When we think of ancient Egypt, most of us imagine solemn pyramids, silent tombs, and gods gazing down from painted temple walls. Yet, the Egyptians, like all humans, also loved to celebrate, and one of their strangest and most fascinating festivals was the Festival of Drunkenness, a yearly ritual that mixed divine myth with very earthly revelry. This festival was not a minor occasion. It was tied directly to one of Egypt's most powerful deities, Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, destruction, and fierce protection. Sekhmet was both revered and feared, believed to hold sway over plague and healing, chaos and order. To honor her, and perhaps more importantly, to keep her wrath at bay, the ancient Egyptians gathered each year for a night of ritual intoxication. The origins of the festival come from a dramatic myth known as the destruction of mankind. According to the story, the sun god Ra once sent Sekhmet to punish humanity for disobedience. Sekhmet descended to earth in a bloodthirsty rage, slaughtering humans until the Nile ran red. Terrified that she would wipe out all of creation, Ra devised a plan. He ordered thousands of jars of beer to be dyed red with pomegranate juice and spread across the fields. Believing the liquid to be blood, Sekhmet drank it greedily. But instead of feeding her rage, the beer intoxicated her, calming her fury until she collapsed into a deep sleep. When she awoke, her bloodlust had vanished, and humanity was saved. The Festival of Drunkenness reenacted this myth. Each year, Egyptians gathered in temples, especially those dedicated to Sekhmet and the goddess Hathor, often seen as Sekhmet's gentler counterpart, and drank to excess. Wine and beer flowed freely, music filled the air, and men and women alike surrendered themselves to intoxication. But this was not merely hedonism. To the Egyptians, the act of drinking until overwhelmed mirrored the way Sekhmet had been pacified. By reliving her story, the people believed they could ensure her anger would not return in the coming year. Archaeological discoveries give us remarkable insight into the scale and nature of the festival. At the Temple of Mut in Karnak, excavations revealed massive courtyards and ceremonial spaces designed to host thousands of participants. Inscriptions speak of music, dancing, and sexual freedom as barriers of class and decorum dissolved in the intoxicated atmosphere. For one night, it was said, Egyptians could abandon restraint and enter a state of ecstatic communion with the gods. The festival of drunkenness was as much about altered consciousness as it was about celebration. In Egyptian belief, intoxication could open the soul to divine influence, to stagger, to laugh uncontrollably, to fall into dreams. These were not simply signs of drunkenness, but sacred states of being, in which the human world and the divine overlapped. Priests and priestesses encouraged participants to lose themselves, because in losing the self, one became open to the gods. It is striking, too, how this festival emphasized balance. Egypt was a land obsessed with order, Ma'at, the cosmic harmony of truth and justice. Most of the year, life was structured, controlled, and carefully measured. But once a year, at the festival of drunkenness, order gave way to chaos. People feasted, drank, danced, and surrendered to excess. In doing so, they restored balance, acknowledging that chaos was as much a part of life as order. By containing it within a ritual night, they ensured that harmony would prevail the rest of the year. Not everyone approved, of course. Later sources describe some Egyptians disliking the festival's excesses, especially the breakdown of social barriers. But the fact that the celebration endured for centuries suggests that it was deeply meaningful to those who took part. What makes the festival of drunkenness so fascinating is how it combined opposites: violence and peace, destruction and salvation, chaos and harmony. In drinking until collapse, the Egyptians believed they were not dishonoring their gods, but participating in a divine drama that protected the world itself. In the end, the festival reveals something profound about humanity. Even in one of the most structured civilizations in history, people carved out a time for wildness, laughter, and release. By surrendering to joy and chaos, they reaffirmed the very order they lived by. And so, each year, under the Egyptian stars, temples that by day echoed with solemn rituals became places of music, dancing, and overflowing cups. The festival of drunkenness was more than a party. It was a sacred reminder that even the gods themselves needed laughter, intoxication, and relief. Section 5. The exploding cows and flying lanterns of Thailand's ancient Loy Krathong origins. If Egypt's festival of drunkenness revealed the power of chaos and intoxication, then Southeast Asia's Loy Krathong, a luminous festival of water and light, represents the opposite, a ritual of calm release, forgiveness, and renewal. Today, Loy Krathong is celebrated every November in Thailand, with millions of small floating offerings released onto rivers and lakes. But its ancient origins, as well as the eccentric practices tied to it, are far stranger than most tourists realize. The heart of Loy Krathong lies in its central act: people crafting small krathongs, lotus-shaped rafts made from banana leaves, flowers, candles, and incense, and setting them afloat on water. Each krathong carries away misfortune, anger, and regret, while inviting good luck for the year ahead. It is a ceremony of letting go, watched over by Mekongka, the goddess of rivers. But beneath this serene act of floating lights lies a tapestry of myths, rituals, and even bizarre practices long forgotten. One of the oldest legends connected to Loy Krathong traces back to a story of a cow that exploded under the power of magic. According to certain Thai folktales, villagers once honored the water goddess with animal sacrifices, among them cows. In one curious tale, a cow was filled with gunpowder and set alight, exploding spectacularly as an offering meant to dazzle the gods. While the image feels almost unbelievable, fragments of this myth survive in oral tradition, a reminder of how older, rougher rituals were later softened into the gentler floating lights we see today. What began with fire and sacrifice eventually transformed into a ritual of beauty and calm. Even without exploding cows, the festival was not always as peaceful as it appears now. In its earliest incarnations, Loy Krathong included loud firework displays, mock battles, and sometimes drunken celebrations by riversides. Lanterns, both floating on water and flying into the sky, were considered a way of carrying prayers upward, but they could also set entire villages ablaze. Some sources suggest that ancient kings used the mass release of sky lanterns to inspire awe among their people, turning what looked like divine fire in the heavens into a political tool. Imagine being a farmer centuries ago, looking up to see thousands of fiery globes ascending all at once, believing the gods themselves had answered the prayers of your king. But beyond spectacle, the festival has always carried a deep emotional resonance. In Thailand, as well as in parts of Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, Loy Krathong represented an annual cleansing of the heart. Before the festival, people wrote down their grievances or whispered secrets of sorrow into their krathong. They then set it afloat, watching the water carry away not just the physical raft, but the heaviness in their own souls. Parents encouraged children to place strands of hair or clippings of fingernails onto their krathongs, symbolizing the shedding of past misfortune. Lovers placed krathongs together, believing that if they drifted side by side, their bond would endure through the year. The mythic roots of Loy Krathong also intertwine with Buddhism. Many monks and storytellers linked the act of floating offerings with respect to the Buddha, particularly in gratitude for his teachings on release and impermanence. In one tale, Nang Napamas, a legendary royal consort, is said to have created the very first beautifully decorated krathong to honor her king. Over time, this mythical figure became a symbol of the festival itself, her image still carried in parades today. What makes Loy Krathong so unusual, however, is not just its beauty, but its contradictions. It is a festival of peace, yet its origins are entangled with sacrifice and fire. It is an act of personal release, yet also a public spectacle of lights that has been used for political power. It is rooted in ancient myths of exploding cows and divine appeasement, yet it continues today as one of the most romantic and meditative celebrations on earth. For the ancient participants, these contradictions were not troubling. They were part of the human experience. Life, like the water the krathongs floated upon, was never still. It could reflect the moon in calm serenity, or rage in storms and floods. To honor water meant honoring both its destructive force and its life-giving flow. By sending offerings downstream, people entered into a dialogue with nature itself, one that acknowledged both fear and gratitude. Even now, if you stand on the banks of the Chao Phraya River during Loy Krathong, you can sense echoes of the past. The floating krathongs look serene, but in the background you hear fireworks crackle, laughter erupt, and sometimes even accidents caused by lanterns drifting into rooftops. The calm beauty
of the ritual is always tinged with unpredictability, a reminder of its origins. In this way, Loy Krathong belongs to the same family of unusual festivals as Egypt's drunken revels and Europe's chaotic carnivals. Beneath its calm exterior lies a history of wildness, danger, and transformation. And yet, at its heart, it remains profoundly human, a night to let go, forgive, and begin again. So while today's tourists may marvel at the lights, and couples may treat it as a romantic evening, Loy Krathong's deeper roots tell us something both stranger and more beautiful, that across centuries, people have sought ways to tame chaos with ritual, to give meaning to sorrow, and to find peace in release, even if once upon a time it involved exploding cows.
Section 6. The Feast of Fools, when the church turned upside down. In the rigid world of medieval Europe, where religion ruled nearly every aspect of daily life, few things could seem stranger than a festival held inside cathedrals that looked more like a carnival than a sacred ceremony. Yet once a year, in towns and cities across France, England, and parts of Germany, the Feast of Fools turned order into chaos, reverence into mockery, and solemn ritual into outright hilarity. On the surface, this peculiar celebration was tied to the Christian calendar, often linked to the feast of the circumcision of Christ in early January. But instead of somber prayers, fasting, or quiet devotion, this feast encouraged priests, deacons, and sometimes even bishops to indulge in spectacles that would shock us today. They would wear their robes inside out, don masks, and dress like jesters, transforming sacred vestments into costumes for parody. The altar, normally a place of utmost reverence, became a stage for comic performances, mock sermons, and sometimes even irreverent songs that playfully ridiculed church rituals themselves. At the heart of this bizarre festival was a role reversal. A Lord of Misrule or Bishop of Fools was elected, often a junior cleric or choir boy, who for one day wielded authority over the clergy. With mock grandeur, he would issue ridiculous commands, bless parishioners with nonsense phrases, and preside over parody ceremonies. Imagine a young novice, barely out of childhood, sitting in the bishop's throne, barking out comical orders while the cathedral rang with laughter. The Feast of Fools was more than just entertainment. It was a sanctioned breaking of rules, a way to vent tensions built up under the strict hierarchies of the church and society. Medieval life was governed by order and obedience. Kings ruled peasants, priests ruled congregations, masters ruled apprentices. But during the Feast of Fools, the lowliest member of the choir could boss around senior priests. The hierarchy dissolved, if only briefly, and laughter reigned. Of course, not all aspects of this festival were gentle or innocent. Accounts describe wild processions where costumed priests would parade through the streets, sometimes riding donkeys backward or staging mock parodies of holy rites. In certain regions, they even allowed animals into the church. Donkeys were dressed in clerical garb and led up to the altar, where mock hymns were sung in their honor. One version of the festival, known as the Feast of the Ass, ended with the congregation braying like donkeys in place of the traditional Amen. These spectacles were both comic and unsettling. The laughter they provoked was rooted in the thrill of taboo breaking. Holy rituals turned upside down, sacred spaces defiled with humor. For many medieval participants, this chaos was not only amusing, but also oddly reassuring. It reminded them that even the most powerful institutions could be laughed at,
and that human folly touched everyone, even priests and bishops. What makes the Feast of Fools especially unusual is how official, yet unofficial, it was. Church authorities tolerated it, sometimes even participated, though with growing discomfort. By the 15th century, reformers and theologians were condemning the practice as scandalous, blasphemous, and dangerous. One church council even tried to ban the braying of donkey hymns, horrified by the mockery of holy services. Yet the festival persisted for centuries because it fulfilled a need that ordinary religious life could not: the need to laugh, to rebel, and to release. The Feast of Fools is not so different from other inversion festivals found around the world. In ancient Rome, Saturnalia had once flipped masters into servants and encouraged wild indulgence. In medieval England, the Lord of Misrule played a similar role at Christmas festivities, but the Feast of Fools stood out because it occurred inside churches themselves, places that were supposed to embody holiness and order. It blurred the line between sacred and profane in a way that few other festivals dared. Why did people embrace it so passionately? Perhaps because in a world of strict roles and unbending hierarchies, the festival offered a rare moment of freedom. Laughter became not just amusement, but survival. For the peasants who watched priests make fools of themselves, or for the young cleric elevated for a day, the Feast of Fools must have been exhilarating, a reminder that life could not be entirely controlled by rules and rituals. And yet, there was also something deeper in this strangeness. By parodying rituals, by mocking the sacred, participants acknowledged the absurdity of human pride. They laughed at authority, but also at themselves. The donkey's bray at the end of the mock mass may have been irreverent, but it also reminded everyone that humans, too, were creatures of folly, fallible, ridiculous, and in need of humility. In this sense, the Feast of Fools was not only an unusual medieval carnival, but also a profound expression of humanity's need to balance seriousness with laughter, devotion with play, and power with humility. Though it eventually faded under pressure from church reformers, the echoes of the Feast of Fools live on in modern carnivals, April Fool's Day, pranks, and festivals of parody around the world. It reminds us that no matter how rigidly society is structured, people will always find ways to laugh at authority, mock themselves, and dance with the absurd. And so, when we think of unusual festivals in history, few stand out as vividly as this one. A day when cathedrals became comedy halls, priests became jesters, and the holy was transformed into hilarity. Section 7. The Andean Festivals of Blood and Dance. High in the Andes, long before the arrival of Europeans, life was defined by the rhythms of the mountains, the sun, and the gods who were believed to dwell in every peak, river, and stone. The Inca Empire, at its height, organized festivals that were as grand as any coronation in Europe, but often stranger and more intense to our modern eyes. Among the most unusual was a series of ritual festivals where the human body itself became the ultimate offering. One of the most famous was Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun, held each year around the June solstice in honor of Inti, the sun god. Thousands of people would gather in the city of Cusco, the empire's heart, filling plazas with chanting, dancing, and music. Golden masks, brightly dyed tunics, and feathered headdresses turned the crowd into a living mosaic of color. At first glance, this may seem like a celebration of beauty and light, but beneath the dancing lay something far stranger: offerings of blood, believed to nourish the gods and maintain cosmic balance. The idea behind this was simple, at least for the Incas. The gods had given humans life and bounty, so humans had to return some of that life energy. While animal sacrifices were common, llamas, for instance, were killed in rituals. Sometimes human blood was drawn as well. Participants, often priests or nobles, would pierce their skin with sharp instruments, letting drops of blood fall onto the ground or into sacred vessels. This act wasn't seen as painful punishment, but as a sacred duty, a way of personally binding one's body to the gods. What's fascinating is how these rituals mixed severity with celebration. The same festival that included bloodletting also overflowed with dancing and drinking. Music filled the air, drums thundered, flutes shrilled, and dancers moved in hypnotic patterns that mirrored the sun's journey across the sky. It was as if joy and sacrifice were two halves of the same coin, inseparable from one another. But even more unusual were the ritual battles that sometimes took place during these festivals. In certain Andean communities, celebrants would stage fights, mock battles that occasionally turned into real bloodshed. Known as tinku, these clashes were not merely about violence, but about feeding the earth with blood. The spilling of blood, whether from a cut finger or a bruised nose, was seen as a gift to Pachamama, the Earth Mother, ensuring fertility and prosperity for the crops. The battles could be brutal, but they were also embraced as essential parts of the sacred cycle. For the modern observer, this blending of festivity and blood might feel unsettling, even disturbing. Yet for the Incas and their predecessors, it was entirely natural. Life in the Andes was precarious. Harsh climates, thin air, and unpredictable weather meant survival depended on the goodwill of the gods. Festivals that combined music, dance, joy, and sacrifice were attempts to secure that goodwill, no matter how strange or frightening they might seem to us today. Interestingly, these Andean festivals were not only about the relationship between humans and gods, but also about reinforcing the empire's social fabric. The Inca rulers used them as opportunities to display their wealth and power. During Inti Raymi, for example, enormous quantities of food and chicha, a fermented corn beer, were distributed freely to the people. For ordinary peasants, the chance to eat and drink to their fill, to dance alongside nobles, and to take part in blood rituals must have been exhilarating. It blurred the lines between classes, uniting the empire under the shared experience of the festival. But perhaps the strangest element of all is how joy and suffering were interwoven in these celebrations. Imagine standing in a great crowd, the sun blazing overhead, drums echoing through your chest, dancers whirling in circles of color. Around you, people laugh, sing, and drink. Yet nearby, a priest draws blood from his arm and lets it drip onto the earth, while two men engage in a ritual fight, their fists flying, blood spotting the ground. This contrast was not contradictory. It was the essence of the festival. Both joy and sacrifice were needed to honor the gods and keep the universe in balance. Even today, echoes of these traditions survive. In modern Peru and Bolivia, some communities still practice tinku, ritual battles where blood spilled is believed to please Pachamama. Inti Raymi, though transformed into a cultural performance for tourists, still fills Cusco with dancers in radiant costumes, reminding the world of its ancient roots. When compared to medieval Europe's Feast of Fools or Asia's lantern festivals, the Andean rituals stand out for their intensity. They were not simply about laughter or light, but about facing life's harshness head-on. For the Incas, survival required both celebration and sacrifice, both dance and blood. In the grand tapestry of unusual festivals, the Andean traditions remind us that what may seem bizarre or frightening to one culture can be profoundly sacred to another. They teach us that joy does not always mean comfort, and that even in the midst of laughter and music, there can be solemn offerings to the unseen powers that shape human destiny. Section 8. Festivals where animals took center stage. When we think of festivals, we usually imagine people as the stars of the celebration. Yet in some corners of the world, especially in Asia, it was animals who stepped into the spotlight. From elephants adorned in glittering silks to monkeys showered with fruit, medieval animal festivals show us a side of human history that was equal parts bizarre, tender, and symbolic. Perhaps the most famous example comes from India, where animals, particularly elephants, were not only beasts of burden, but sacred participants in the spiritual and cultural life of the people. Elephants were symbols of wisdom, strength, and divine blessing. During certain medieval festivals, precursors to today's Thiruvananthapuram Elephant Festival in Kerala, elephants were decorated in elaborate costumes, with golden headdresses, painted tusks, and anklets that jingled as they walked. What makes these celebrations so fascinating is that the elephants were treated not merely as animals, but as vessels of divine energy. People would bow before them, offer them food, and see their presence as a direct blessing from the gods. To watch a procession of elephants, glowing with ornaments and swaying to the beat of drums, must have been a sight of both majesty and strangeness. The animals became moving altars, living embodiments of the sacred, yet at the same time, they were also paraded for entertainment, a dual role that highlights humanity's complex relationship with the creatures around us. But elephants were not the only animals to be honored in this way. In Nepal, the Kukur Tihar festival, which traces its roots back to medieval times, has long been a day when dogs are celebrated as protectors and companions. Garlands of marigolds were draped around their necks, their foreheads marked with bright red tika powder, and plates of food were offered to them in gratitude. Imagine the scene. In the midst of a bustling medieval town, dogs wandering joyfully between crowds, tails wagging, eyes shining, each one wearing a crown of flowers and being petted and fed by children and elders alike. The idea that animals could be not only helpers, but also spiritual allies, runs deep in these traditions. Dogs, believed to guard the thresholds between the human and spiritual worlds, were honored to ensure their protection in this life and the next. In a time when disease, bandits, and wild predators were real threats, honoring dogs was both a comforting ritual and a practical acknowledgement of their loyalty. If dogs and elephants symbolized protection and strength, then monkeys represented mischief and vitality. In parts of Thailand and Cambodia, there were long-standing traditions of offering food to monkeys, particularly in temples, where they were considered sacred companions of the gods. Some accounts describe massive feasts laid out for them, with fruits piled high in grand displays. The monkeys, of course, did not politely nibble. They swarmed the tables, snatched delicacies, and chattered in excitement, turning the solemnity of the offering into a chaotic spectacle. From a medieval perspective, though, this chaos was not disrespectful. Instead, it was believed that by feeding the monkeys, people were pleasing the gods themselves, especially Hanuman, the monkey god who embodied courage, devotion, and playful energy. The sight of hundreds of monkeys leaping over tables, scattering fruit, and clambering onto temple walls, while drums beat and incense filled the air, would have been one of the strangest and liveliest scenes in any festival. What makes these animal-centered celebrations particularly fascinating is the balance they struck between reverence and amusement. On the one hand, animals were honored as sacred beings, symbols of divine forces. On the other hand, their unpredictable behavior brought laughter and delight to the crowds. This duality made the festivals both solemn and joyful, sacred and humorous, an echo of how deeply animals were woven into the fabric of human life. There is also something deeply calming in the thought that, in the middle of the Middle Ages, while wars raged and empires rose and fell, entire towns paused to decorate elephants, garland dogs, and feed monkeys. It reminds us that joy, kindness, and even whimsy were as important to our ancestors as devotion and duty. If we compare this to the festivals of Europe or South America, where blood and sacrifice often played a central role, the Asian animal festivals stand out as gentler, though no less strange. Instead of spilling blood to nourish gods, people gave food, flowers, and respect to the animals they lived alongside. These celebrations may seem odd to modern eyes, but they reveal a timeless truth, that humanity has always sought ways to honor the creatures that share our world, sometimes elevating them into the realm of the divine. Even today, echoes of these medieval traditions survive. In Nepal, Kukur Tihar continues as a cherished holiday, and in Thailand, the Monkey Buffet Festival still sees thousands of monkeys enjoying banquets of fruit. They may draw tourists now, but their roots lie in the same medieval belief that animals deserve celebration, reverence, and gratitude. In the long gallery of bizarre festivals, these animal-centered celebrations offer us something different, not blood or chaos, but a playful reminder that the bonds between humans and animals are sacred, enduring, and sometimes delightfully strange.
Section 9. When food became the star of the festival. Food has always been central to human life, not only as nourishment, but as a symbol of community, abundance, and ritual. In the Middle Ages, this truth took on some very unusual forms. There were festivals where food wasn't just eaten, but thrown, paraded, worshipped, or even fought over. These celebrations may sound silly today, but for medieval people, they carried layers of meaning. Gratitude for harvests, acts of charity, or even social rebellion dressed up in merriment. One of the strangest food-centered traditions can be traced to medieval Spain, where villages would stage chaotic food battles that still echo in today's famous La Tomatina in Buñol. While the modern tomato-throwing festival didn't exist in the Middle Ages, there were similar events where bread, fruit, or grain was tossed in playful mock fights. Imagine a medieval square filled with peasants and townsfolk, baskets of overripe fruit and stale loaves becoming ammunition, and laughter mingling with the sound of squashed apples hitting wooden shields. These battles, though silly, symbolized plenty. When there was enough to throw food away, it meant survival and fortune had smiled on the community. Meanwhile, in France, elaborate food processions took place. During certain feasts, giant loaves of bread, wheels of cheese, or entire roasted animals were paraded through towns like sacred relics. The most unusual among these were the Feast of the Fat Ox festivals, where a live ox was dressed in garlands and ribbons, sometimes even painted in bright colors, and led through the streets to be admired before being roasted and shared by the community. The ox was more than just food. It was a walking symbol of prosperity, a promise of feasting, and a spectacle in itself. People followed the ox like it was a celebrity, cheering as musicians played and dancers circled. In England, food festivals took on a more rebellious tone. The Feast of Fools, already a bizarre celebration where peasants mocked clergy and turned social order upside down, sometimes featured parodies of sacred meals. People would roast absurdly large pies or bake bread in the shapes of strange creatures, exaggerating both the solemnity and the abundance of religious feasts. Instead of reverent meals, there were comic ones, where eating itself became a performance. The line between mockery and celebration blurred, and laughter filled the halls where only solemn hymns had been heard days before. But perhaps the most heartwarming of food-centered festivals was the charity feast tradition found across Europe. During good harvest years, towns organized great communal meals, where the wealthy provided food to the poor in massive displays of abundance. Picture long wooden tables stretched across a town square, covered with steaming stews, fresh bread, roasted meats, and jugs of ale. Everyone ate together, rich, poor, and in between. For a single day, divisions of class and status softened, replaced by the shared joy of eating. In these moments, food wasn't just sustenance, it was equality, a symbol of unity in a fractured world. Food also became a medium for games. In some medieval German festivals, contests were held where people tried to climb greased poles, to snatch hanging sausages or pies. The image is almost comical. Villagers scrambling up slippery poles, falling into haystacks, while the crowd roared with laughter. Winning a sausage may not seem like much, but in times when food scarcity was real, that prize meant more than amusement. It meant prestige, luck, and a story to tell for years. What unites all these food festivals is the way they transformed eating, normally a private, practical act, into a public ritual of joy, chaos, and meaning. Food became a language of celebration. To throw it was to show abundance. To parade it was to honor life's gifts. To share it was to strengthen community. There is something deeply calming in realizing that medieval people, living with hardship, uncertainty, and the constant threat of famine, still found ways to laugh, play, and even waste food in ritualistic ways. These festivals weren't frivolous. They were reminders that life, however fragile, deserved celebration. And while some of these traditions have faded, echoes remain. From Italy's extravagant food festivals to Spain's La Tomatina, we still gather around food, not just to eat, but to celebrate, to laugh, and to remind ourselves of the joy of abundance. So the next time you sit at a holiday table, remember, for centuries, humanity has danced, feasted, and even hurled bread loaves across town squares to honor the miracle of food. Section 10. Festivals of Light and Fire. In many parts of the medieval world, festivals were not just about music, animals, or food. They were also about light. Fire has always fascinated humanity. It warms, illuminates, and enchants, and in the Middle Ages, people celebrated it in ways that were both magical and strange. From flickering torches to enormous bonfires, these festivals turned ordinary towns into glowing landscapes, offering wonder, celebration, and sometimes a little danger. One of the most common fire festivals occurred in Scandinavia, where midwinter celebrations often involved giant bonfires. Villagers would gather on hillsides or in open fields, stacking wood high and lighting it with sparks from flint. The flames were more than spectacle. They were believed to keep evil spirits at bay during the darkest months. Smoke spiraled into the sky, and people would circle the fire, singing songs, telling stories.
and sometimes tossing offerings into the flames as a form of blessing.
In England, the festival of Bonfire Night has roots that reach back to medieval times, long before it became associated with the gunpowder plot.
Communities would light fires to mark the end of winter, the start of planting season, or other significant events. Children carried small torches, adults danced in long lines, and the sound of crackling fire blended with laughter and music. These celebrations transformed the darkness into light, literally and figuratively, giving people hope during the long, cold nights. The Festival of Lanterns in parts of medieval Europe brought a more delicate kind of illumination. Villagers made lanterns from carved wood or animal hide, placing candles inside so that soft light would glow through the designs. Streets would be lined with hundreds of these tiny lanterns, flickering in the wind, creating a river of gentle light through the town. People walked slowly along the paths, admiring the glow, feeling both calm and awed by the simple beauty of so many points of light. Unlike the roaring bonfires, lantern festivals had a quieter, almost meditative charm. In France and Italy, fire was often used in more theatrical ways. Pyrotechnics were rudimentary but dazzling. Flaming wheels were rolled down hills, torches were twirled by performers, and smoke filled the evening air with a mysterious haze. Medieval people did not have electric lights, of course, so the fire itself became an extraordinary visual experience. Imagine a town square lit by dozens of torches and bonfires, with smoke drifting and dancing shadows flickering on the stone walls of surrounding buildings. The entire scene would feel otherworldly, almost dreamlike, in a way that modern streetlights cannot replicate. Some festivals combined fire with water. In certain parts of Germany, people floated candles on rivers during solstice celebrations. The soft glow reflected in the moving water, creating a shimmering effect that seemed magical. The sound of water lapping and the smell of smoke made the experience multisensory, leaving spectators relaxed, mesmerized, and perhaps even a little enchanted. These festivals were as much about contemplation as celebration. Children often played a role in fire festivals. They carried small torches, helped light bonfires, or even participated in harmless fire games under adult supervision. From a modern perspective, it seems risky, but in the Middle Ages, learning to respect fire was a vital skill, and turning it into a festival allowed people to interact with it safely and joyfully. Families would gather together, and for a few hours, everyone, young and old, was united in awe and delight. Even the smallest festivals incorporated fire in subtle ways. Candles in churches, torches along market streets, and tiny hearth fires in private homes created a shared atmosphere of warmth and safety. Fire represented both survival and celebration, illuminating the night, warding off fear, and connecting communities. Medieval fire festivals also carried symbolic meaning. They often marked transitions, the passing of seasons, the beginning of planting or harvest, or moments of spiritual significance. Fire became a living reminder that light can triumph over darkness, that warmth can conquer cold, and that even in uncertain times, human communities could come together to create wonder and joy. Looking back on these festivals, it is easy to see the beauty and strangeness of medieval life. Towns and villages transformed for nights into glowing wonderlands, where people moved, sang, and celebrated alongside flames that could both mesmerize and intimidate. Fire was both playful and sacred, chaotic and orderly, a centerpiece for medieval imagination. Even today, the echoes remain in festivals of fire across the world, from European midsummer bonfires to Asian lantern celebrations, showing that our ancestors' fascination with fire continues to inspire awe, calm, and fascination. Section 11. Medieval Water Festivals. Water has always been vital to life, but in the Middle Ages, it was also a source of wonder, play, and ceremonial importance. Rivers, fountains, and even wells became central to festivals that were lively, unusual, and sometimes oddly enchanting. People celebrated water, not only for its life-giving properties, but also for its playful and transformative qualities. In France, some medieval towns held river pageants, where townspeople decorated boats with colorful fabrics, flowers, and candles. Entire neighborhoods gathered along riverbanks to watch the procession. Musicians played flutes, drums, and lutes, creating a soft, rhythmic soundtrack that blended with the gentle flow of water. Children leaned over the edges of boats, dropping small paper lanterns into the current. The lanterns floated downstream, casting reflections that shimmered and danced, creating a calm, dreamlike spectacle that lingered in memory long after the festival ended. In England, water games were often part of larger celebrations. Villagers would organize contests on rivers, such as floating objects or balancing on planks over shallow streams. Some festivals involved tossing small wooden figures or carved animals into rivers as symbolic offerings, hoping to bring good luck, fertile crops, or protection from floods. These simple acts turned ordinary water into a stage for ritual, entertainment, and community participation. People watched with gentle laughter and soft applause, enjoying the combination of skill, chance, and serene beauty. Italy also had unique traditions involving fountains. In some cities, fountains were temporarily decorated with flowers, ribbons, and figures of saints or animals made from wood or clay. Water flowed gently over these displays, reflecting sunlight in soft glimmers that created a magical atmosphere. Children and adults alike would gather around, dipping their hands in the cool water or tossing coins for luck. The slow movement of water, the soft splashes, and the sparkling reflections created a meditative environment where even the busiest townsfolk could pause and breathe. One of the most unusual water festivals took place in parts of Germany, where towns celebrated the arrival of spring by pouring large quantities of water over statues or public squares. People would splash each other in good-natured games, sometimes using wooden buckets or leather bags filled with water. The festival symbolized cleansing, renewal, and the washing away of winter's hardships. Laughter echoed across town squares as the gentle spray cooled sun-warmed faces. In Spain, some medieval festivals centered on wells and natural springs. Villagers gathered around these sacred or practical water sources to perform dances, sing psalms, and offer symbolic gifts. Water was poured into carved stone basins or collected in beautifully decorated jugs, which were then used in rituals for fertility, health, or protection from disease. The movement of water, the sound of trickling streams, and the delicate ritual acts created a soothing, almost hypnotic effect. Even during large city celebrations, water could be used for dramatic yet calming displays. In some towns, fountains were temporarily decorated with colored liquids or flower petals. Gentle streams cascaded in patterns, reflecting the sunlight and casting a rainbow of colors across cobblestones. People would sit quietly along the edges, letting the soft sounds of flowing water and the cool mist create a serene atmosphere amid the festival's larger activity. Water festivals also included symbolic acts, tossing objects into rivers, sprinkling water on participants, or creating small floating lights, all represented transitions, blessings, or communal hope. These traditions reminded medieval people of the constant flow of life, the importance of nature, and the small joys that could be found even in ordinary, everyday elements like rivers, streams, and fountains. Children often played a large role. Simple games, floating small boats, racing jugs along currents, or balancing on wet stones, offered delight while teaching respect for water. The sound of splashing, soft laughter, and the reflections of sun on rippling water created a calm, happy environment. For adults, watching these scenes offered relaxation, contemplation, and gentle amusement, as well as the satisfaction of seeing children engage safely with the world around them. Even today, echoes of medieval water festivals exist. Modern river parades, fountain shows, and floating lantern festivals around the world remind us of how our ancestors celebrated water as a source of life, community, and gentle wonder. Water festivals of the medieval world were more than entertainment. They celebrated abundance, renewal, and the rhythms of nature. They created moments of calm, awe, and togetherness, reminding people to pause and reflect on the beauty of the flowing world.
Section 12. Festivals of music and sound. Music has always been a part of human life, and in the Middle Ages it was a way to celebrate, tell stories, and connect communities. Festivals often centered around sounds, bells, lutes, drums, flutes, and voices blending in harmony. People were drawn to towns and villages by the soft rhythm of music, eager to listen, participate, and feel the gentle pulse of shared celebration. In France, small towns often held annual music festivals in spring. Minstrels and traveling musicians set up in the town square, playing lutes, harps, and flutes. The music was light, flowing, and calming, filling the air with soft melodies that drifted over cobblestones and rooftops. Villagers would gather, some clapping softly, others simply sitting and listening, letting the harmonies settle over their thoughts like a comforting blanket. Even the children were part of this soundscape, adding the occasional small drum beat or jingling bells, their laughter blending with the music in a gentle chorus. In Italy, church bells played a central role in festivals. Bell towers rang out in sequences that marked ceremonies, seasonal changes, or special events. The sounds were layered, echoing across streets and squares, creating a complex tapestry of vibrations. People would pause their daily routines to listen, feeling the vibrations resonate through the stone streets and wooden floors of their homes. These bells reminded everyone of time, place, and the shared rhythm of life. Medieval music festivals often involved dance. In England, villagers would gather in open fields to perform traditional dances accompanied by flutes and tambourines. The music was soft but rhythmic, allowing dancers to move slowly or spin gracefully. Each step was deliberate, each motion measured, creating a serene, almost hypnotic spectacle. The combination of movement and sound helped people feel connected to each other, to the land, and to the passing of the seasons. Some festivals were more experimental with sound. In Germany, people would create soundscapes using natural objects. Wooden sticks, hollow logs, and clay pots became percussion instruments, while reeds and leaves were blown to create wind-like tones. These sounds were not organized into songs, but layered together to form a gentle, immersive experience. Villagers often walked slowly through these performances, letting the overlapping tones wash over them. The effect was calming and mesmerizing, a meditation through listening. In Spain, music festivals sometimes focused on singing rather than instruments. Groups of villagers, monks, or traveling minstrels would sing in call and response patterns. The songs told stories, recited legends, or simply celebrated daily life. Voices echoed across plazas and courtyards, blending with the ambient sounds of water, wind, and footsteps. Listeners often closed their eyes to fully absorb the harmonies, allowing themselves to be transported into a calm, reflective state. Music festivals were also tied to other elements, like fire or water. Torches flickered as minstrels played nearby, or lanterns floated on rivers while melodies drifted across the water. These sensory combinations created magical atmospheres, where sight, sound, and movement all worked together to immerse people in the celebration. Even a simple melody could feel transformative when experienced within these carefully crafted surroundings. Children often contributed by clapping, singing simple tunes, or shaking small rattles. Their participation was encouraged, both for enjoyment and for learning musical skills. Adults, meanwhile, often played instruments, led dances, or conducted the flow of sound through the community. These festivals blurred the line between performer and audience, fostering a sense of unity and calm shared among all participants. One of the more unusual traditions involved hidden sound makers. In some villages, small bells or chimes were placed along streets, courtyards, or gardens. As people moved through the space, the bells created a random, gentle musical accompaniment to their steps. This subtle, ambient sound added a layer of magic to everyday movement, making ordinary spaces feel alive and musical. Even today, echoes of these medieval music festivals exist in folk traditions, choral gatherings, and street performances. The principles remain the same. Music brings people together, soothes the mind, and creates a gentle rhythm that mirrors the natural flow of life. Medieval music festivals were not just entertainment. They were immersive experiences that blended sound, movement, and atmosphere, encouraging calm, reflection, and connection. Whether through structured dances, improvisational soundscapes, or the delicate ringing of bells, these celebrations allowed medieval people to experience the soothing and mesmerizing power of music in communal life. Section 13. Festivals of costumes, masks, and strange disguises. In the medieval world, festivals were not just about music, dance, or food. They were also about transformation, imagination, and playful disguise. People of all ages adorned themselves in costumes, masks, and elaborate outfits that allowed them to step into new identities, sometimes for a day, sometimes for several days. These festivals offered a gentle escape from daily life and a chance to explore creativity in a calming, communal environment. In Italy, carnival festivals were famous for their elaborate masks. Citizens and visitors would prepare masks made from leather, wood, or papier-mâché, often decorated with gold leaf, feathers, and delicate paints. The masks hid the wearer's identity, allowing them to wander through streets,
participate in games, and speak with strangers without social constraint. Behind each mask was a sense of playful mystery, a gentle curiosity about who might be behind the painted face. People moved slowly through the crowded squares, gliding past fountains and shops, enjoying the quiet thrill of anonymity while observing others do the same. Costumes varied greatly depending on social class, wealth, and imagination. Nobles might wear luxurious robes embroidered with gold thread and delicate lace, while townsfolk created simpler, handmade disguises from cloth, fur, and natural dyes. Sometimes these outfits mimicked animals, with masks shaped like foxes, lions, or birds. In other instances, they were fantastical, dragons, giants, or mythical creatures. Even when the costumes were whimsical or bizarre, they were crafted with care, attention to color, texture, and movement. When the wearer walked, the garments shifted softly, catching sunlight or torchlight, creating a quiet, mesmerizing spectacle. Germany had its own traditions of disguise, especially around spring festivals. People would cover themselves in masks made of carved wood, sometimes painted with gentle colors or adorned with ribbons. The masks often represented spirits, local legends, or symbolic figures meant to bring luck, drive away illness, or ensure a fruitful harvest. Children would follow adults, wearing miniature masks and small capes, learning the rituals of costume making while enjoying the playful side of the festival. These celebrations combined gentle education, community bonding, and quiet reflection on the cycles of life and nature. In France, masquerade festivals often coincided with holidays or religious observances. Citizens would don simple masks, cloaks, or hats with unusual shapes. Some people carried props, wooden scepters, painted shields, or delicate staffs adorned with flowers. These props added movement and visual interest to the festivities, allowing participants to act out small stories or gentle skits for others. Villagers would watch, appreciating the effort and creativity, while children learned to navigate the balance between imagination and reality. The slow procession of masked figures, their soft footsteps echoing on cobblestones, created a calm, immersive rhythm throughout the town. Spain had unique traditions with masks and costumes tied to dance. During festivals, people wore masks representing historical figures, animals, or spirits. Dances were often slow, deliberate, and ceremonial, accompanied by soft music from flutes, tambourines, and lutes. The combination of masked faces and gentle rhythms created an almost hypnotic effect. Observers could lose themselves in the movement, imagining the stories behind each mask, feeling a sense of connection with both past and present. Sometimes costumes were symbolic, representing local legends or communal fears. In parts of England, festival goers dressed as giants, demons, or otherworldly creatures. Despite the dramatic appearances, the movements were gentle and playful. Adults often guided children through dances or short performances, emphasizing creativity and fun rather than fright. The exaggerated gestures, flowing robes, and rustling fabrics added to the sensory richness of the festival, encouraging a calm, reflective, and whimsical experience for everyone present. Masks were not limited to faces. Some festivals included full-body disguises made of layered cloth, straw, or papier-mâché. These costumes allowed the wearer to mimic animals, monsters, or abstract forms. Villagers would slowly move through streets or town squares, creating a parade of shifting shapes and muted colors. The soft sound of footsteps on cobblestones, combined with the subtle rustle of fabrics, contributed to a calming auditory experience. Onlookers could follow the parade, tracing patterns and movements, enjoying the slow, rhythmic flow of creative expression. Festivals of disguise were also moments of gentle satire. People would imitate nobles, clergy, or famous local figures, exaggerating characteristics in playful, non-harmful ways. This allowed for reflection on social roles, hierarchy, and human behavior, all while maintaining a soft, calming atmosphere. Laughter and smiles were gentle, never harsh, and the slow pace of the festival emphasized enjoyment rather than chaos. Food and drink often accompanied costume festivals. Soft bread, gentle spiced pastries, and sweet drinks were shared among participants. These treats were simple but comforting, adding to the relaxed, pleasant mood of the event. Children and adults alike would pause to enjoy refreshments, allowing themselves a moment of quiet reflection amidst the playful chaos of masks and movement. Some festivals involved small performances or storytelling. Masked figures might act out tales from folklore or historical events, using gestures, props, and gentle music. The slow unfolding of stories encouraged contemplation, drawing spectators into a soft, narrative rhythm. Observers could imagine themselves within the stories, feeling a sense of calm and immersion. In all these celebrations, the combination of masks, costumes, music, and gentle movement created a multi-sensory experience. Eyes, ears, and touch were all engaged, while the slow pace ensured that no one felt rushed or overwhelmed. Even the most bizarre or whimsical costume contributed to a sense of wonder and shared enjoyment. Medieval festivals of costumes and masks remind us that creativity, imagination, and gentle play have long been part of human life. By stepping into new identities, people explored emotion, story, and symbolism in ways that were immersive, calming, and collectively joyful. These festivals were not only entertaining, but also meditative, allowing participants to experience a blend of whimsy, tradition, and social connection. The next time you see a mask, a costume, or a parade, you might imagine the soft footsteps, the gentle laughter, and the shimmering fabrics of medieval festivals, where people celebrated creativity, community, and calm in equal measure.
Section 14. Medieval food festivals and feasts. In medieval Europe, food was more than sustenance. It was a reason for celebration, a way to bring people together, and a way to mark the seasons. Festivals and feasts were carefully planned, often tied to religious holidays, harvests, or local traditions. These gatherings created a soft, communal rhythm where the preparation, presentation, and enjoyment of food all contributed to a calm and pleasant experience. In France, local harvest festivals often revolved around bread. Bakers would prepare special loaves, sometimes braided or decorated with grains, and villagers would slowly gather in the town square to taste the fresh bread. The aroma of warm crust and soft, yeasty centers drifted through the streets, mingling with the scent of fresh flowers and spring air. Families would sit together on benches or grassy patches, breaking bread slowly, savoring each bite, and sharing small stories and gentle laughter. Even the children would participate, learning how to appreciate simple flavors while feeling the rhythm of the community around them. In Italy, olive oil was a central part of food festivals. Small villages would hold celebrations when the new oil was ready, pressing olives with wooden presses while people watched. the scent of fresh oil mixed with herbs like rosemary or thyme, creating a calming, almost fragrant environment. Villagers would taste the oil on soft bread, drizzle it over vegetables, or dip small pieces of meat. The movements of people, as they wandered from press to tasting table, were slow and deliberate, allowing everyone to enjoy the process and the flavors without rush. Meat was also part of feasts, though often in small portions. In England, village festivals featured roasted fowl, sausages, and sometimes pork, slowly cooked over open fires. The aroma of roasting meat blended with the smoke of firewood and the scent of fresh herbs, creating a warm, comforting atmosphere. People would gather around long wooden tables, taking small, deliberate bites and passing platters carefully. Conversation was gentle, with stories and advice shared in calm tones, as children observed the traditions of communal dining. Spain had a tradition of gentle wine festivals. During these events, families and neighbors would gather to taste freshly pressed wine, usually in small quantities, alongside soft cheeses, almonds, and fruit. The process of sipping slowly, appreciating subtle flavors, and watching the sun set over vineyards created a quiet, almost meditative experience. Musicians might provide soft background music, but the focus was on savoring, observing, and quietly celebrating the season's bounty. Sweet treats were also celebrated in medieval feasts. Honey cakes, sugared nuts, and fruit preserves were often part of festivals in Germany. These treats were prepared with care, sometimes using molds or intricate designs, adding a visual charm to the sensory pleasure. Villagers would take small portions, observing the details and savoring the soft sweetness. Even simple pastries were presented with care, emphasizing mindfulness and gentle appreciation of food. In many regions, food festivals were also educational. Children were taught how to prepare simple dishes, bake bread, or press olives. They learned to appreciate the textures, colors, and aromas of ingredients, and they were encouraged to observe the patience and care that went into each step. Watching adults knead dough, stir pots, or slice herbs became part of the festival experience, blending education, participation, and calm observation. Fish festivals were common near rivers or coasts. In Norway and the Netherlands, villagers would gather to celebrate the abundance of herring or freshwater fish. Fish were often smoked, salted, or gently grilled over slow fires. The smell of smoke, brine, and cooking fish mingled with the cool air of riversides, creating a soft, sensory environment. People would taste small portions, sometimes pairing them with bread or soft cheeses, and the rhythm of tasting, conversation, and gentle laughter created a serene communal atmosphere. Even the presentation of food contributed to the calming effect of festivals. Tables were often decorated with fresh flowers, greenery, or colored cloths. Platters of bread, fruits, and cheeses were arranged in patterns that were visually pleasing and easy to access. People moved slowly along the tables, selecting small items and engaging in quiet conversation. The careful layout, combined with the scents and textures of food, created a multi-sensory experience that encouraged reflection, appreciation, and calm interaction. Some festivals included gentle competitions, like the best loaf of bread, most beautiful pastry, or most flavorful honey. These contests were conducted with a soft spirit, focusing on creativity, skill, and participation, rather than aggression or rivalry. Winners would be announced with smiles and applause, and everyone would still share in tasting and appreciation. The process encouraged mindfulness, observation, and a gentle form of celebration. Seasonal ingredients were central to medieval food festivals. Spring brought fresh herbs, tender vegetables, and new grains. Summer offered berries, soft fruits, and fresh fish. Autumn celebrated the harvest of grains, apples, and nuts. Winter focused on preserved foods, dried fruits, and hearty stews. Each festival highlighted the gentle rhythm of nature, connecting people to the cycles of the year and the work of tending, gathering, and preparing food. Even in quieter moments, food festivals had a calming quality. Watching the sunlight glint off fresh fruit, feeling the warmth of bread, or inhaling the scent of roasting meat invited a slow, deliberate awareness of the senses. Conversation, laughter, and music were soft and measured, creating a sense of collective calm and gentle enjoyment. These festivals also fostered a sense of connection across generations. Grandparents shared traditional recipes, adults demonstrated cooking techniques, and children observed and participated. This exchange of knowledge was quiet and attentive, reinforcing both social bonds and mindfulness. People appreciated not only the food, but also the care, skill, and time that went into its preparation. Medieval food festivals were therefore much more than simple gatherings. They were immersive, multi-sensory experiences that combined taste, smell, sight, and sound into a calm and reflective celebration. By savoring, observing, and participating slowly, people connected with one another, with nature, and with the rhythms of their communities. Even today, echoes of these festivals remain in seasonal fairs, harvest celebrations, and community feasts. The principles are the same: slow, deliberate tasting, mindful observation, and gentle social connection create experiences that are calming, enjoyable, and meaningful. Medieval food festivals remind us that even in times of simplicity, people found ways to celebrate with care, creativity, and calm. Through flavors, aromas, textures, and gentle communal rhythms, these gatherings allowed participants to enjoy both sustenance and serenity, blending nourishment with mindful appreciation. Section 15. Small local festivals and quiet year-end celebrations. As the year drew to a close in medieval towns and villages, people often turned to smaller, quieter festivals to mark the passing of seasons and to honor local traditions. Unlike the grand carnivals or harvest festivals, these celebrations were intimate, calming, and filled with gentle observation of both nature and community. Villagers would gather in small squares, courtyards, or near local chapels, enjoying soft music, simple foods, and the soothing rhythm of ritual. In England, many villages celebrated the end of harvest with modest festivals that included small dances, soft songs, and the sharing of seasonal treats. People would wear simple costumes, sometimes adorned with ribbons or small floral decorations. Children and adults alike participated in slow processions, often carrying small lanterns that glowed softly in the twilight. The lantern light reflected on cobblestones and half-timbered walls, creating a warm, comforting glow that encouraged quiet reflection and connection. Germany had traditions of village blessing festivals at year's end. Residents would gather herbs, branches, and small wreaths, often symbolizing protection, fertility, or gratitude. The wreaths were carefully arranged on doors, windows, or placed on tables during communal meals. Participants moved deliberately, weaving the greenery with attention and care. Children observed and learned, while elders shared soft stories about the significance of each plant,
creating a gentle bridge between generations and a feeling of timeless continuity. In France, small villages celebrated with modest candlelit processions. People would walk slowly through narrow streets, carrying candles and sometimes singing soft carols. The air would carry a mix of scents: burning tallow from candles, smoke from small hearth fires, and the faint sweetness of pastries or roasted chestnuts shared along the way. The combination of flickering light, gentle movement, and subtle aromas created a sensory rhythm that was calming and meditative. Even the brisk winter air felt comforting against the warmth of community and tradition. Some festivals were tied to local legends or unusual customs. In Italy, certain towns had quiet masquerades, where villagers wore small, handcrafted masks and strolled slowly through the streets. These masks were not elaborate. They were simple, often made of cloth or painted leather, but they allowed participants a brief sense of transformation. By gently hiding their faces, villagers could observe one another with fresh eyes, noticing small gestures, kind expressions, or subtle movements that might otherwise go unnoticed. The soft anonymity encouraged mindfulness and calm interaction. Food was central to these small festivals. Villagers would share bread, honey cakes, dried fruits, and soft cheeses. Drinks such as spiced cider, warm milk, or herbal teas were served in small cups. Eating was slow and deliberate, with attention paid to flavors, textures, and the effort that went into preparation. Conversation flowed gently, often with whispered stories, quiet jokes, or shared memories from past years. The pace of the meal encouraged reflection, presence, and appreciation for both sustenance and company. In Spain, quiet year-end festivals sometimes involved gentle music and soft dancing. Local musicians played flutes, lutes, or small drums, and villagers moved slowly, creating patterns across village squares. The dances were not competitive or demanding. They emphasized rhythm, repetition, and a sense of shared enjoyment. Children followed adults, learning basic steps, while elders observed, offering guidance and gentle encouragement. The repetitive movement, combined with soft melodies, created a tranquil, almost hypnotic effect, allowing participants to enter a calm state of collective mindfulness. In Scandinavia, some villages celebrated with lantern-lit boat processions along rivers or fjords. Small boats, each carrying a single candle or lantern, floated silently on calm waters. Families and neighbors gathered along banks, watching the soft glow drift slowly downstream. The reflection of light on water, the gentle ripple of movement, and the quiet murmur of conversation created a meditative atmosphere. These celebrations often ended with soft music or a shared blessing for the year ahead, leaving a lingering sense of peace and gentle anticipation for the future. Festivals could also include quiet rituals of reflection. In some towns, villagers would write small notes of gratitude, hope, or intentions for the new year. These notes were tied to branches, placed in water, or burned in small fires. The actions were performed slowly and deliberately, encouraging calm contemplation. Children watched elders perform these acts, learning patience, attention, and the subtle power of symbolic gestures. By focusing on small, meaningful actions, participants experienced a quiet form of meditation, intertwined with social connection. Nature often played a central role. Villagers might gather around a gently crackling fire, feeling the warmth against cold winter air. They listened to the soft rustling of leaves, the distant cry of a night bird, or the muffled footsteps of neighbors on snow-dusted paths. The sensory combination of warmth, sound, and soft visual stimuli created an immersive environment, allowing participants to feel fully present in the moment. Festivals became a bridge between human ritual and natural rhythm, emphasizing calm observation and gentle enjoyment. Even unusual or whimsical customs were carried out with a soft, reflective tone. In some regions, people would dress small animals in tiny costumes or gently decorate domestic spaces with symbolic items. These actions were playful but conducted slowly, with attention to detail and respect for tradition. The combination of humor, creativity, and mindfulness reinforced a sense of communal harmony, reminding participants that joy could be both gentle and thoughtful. At the end of these quiet year-end festivals, participants often gathered in a circle, either in a central square, a hall, or around a hearth. They shared a final blessing, a soft song, or a whispered story. Children rested in the laps of elders, and neighbors exchanged small tokens of good fortune, such as sprigs of greenery, small baked treats, or handmade charms. The closing moments were calm and reflective, emphasizing connection, gratitude, and quiet celebration rather than noise or spectacle. These small festivals, unlike grand carnivals, focused on intimacy, sensory immersion, and gentle rhythms of community life. They reminded villagers of the passing of time, the importance of gratitude, and the subtle beauty in everyday life. Observers could notice soft movements, the interplay of light and shadow, and the quiet joy of shared effort and creativity. Even today, echoes of these gentle, small-scale celebrations remain in quiet village fairs, seasonal rituals, or intimate community gatherings. The principles are the same: slow movement, mindful observation, gentle music, and soft social interaction create experiences that soothe the mind and spirit. By participating in these festivals, medieval people honored both tradition and the passing of time. They celebrated nature, community, creativity, and reflection. The soft rhythm of rituals, the deliberate enjoyment of food, music, and movement, and the careful attention to symbolic gestures created a space where people could feel connected, mindful, and calm. As the festival ended and villagers returned to their homes, the warm glow of lanterns faded, conversations slowed, and the quiet hum of daily life resumed. Yet the calm, reflective energy lingered, leaving a gentle sense of peace, gratitude, and continuity. And now, dear listener, our journey through the quiet and unusual festivals of the medieval world is coming to a close. You have wandered slowly through streets filled with lanterns, listened to the gentle rhythms of music and dance, smelled the soft fragrances of bread and herbs, and watched communities gather in calm celebration. Take a deep, slow breath, feeling the warmth of these moments, the shared joy, and the quiet wonder of centuries past. Let the softness of lantern light, the gentle rustle of fabrics, and the delicate taste of honey linger in your imagination as you prepare for rest. Close your eyes and allow yourself to drift, carrying with you the calm, immersive feeling of these festivals. Sleep peacefully, knowing that even in the past, people found ways to celebrate, reflect, and enjoy life gently and thoughtfully. Good night.